Welcome back. I'm Dr. Rivka Edery, author of the Spatial Sight System. Day 6, and we're back in the field and back to normal length. Yesterday was long. The lexicon takes what it takes. Today is an ordinary session. Your lexicon pass is sealed. Leave it sealed. Day 19 is on your calendar. We will not speak of it again until then. Today, we take the second of the 3 spatial signals cluster. And here is the whole of today in one sentence. Cards that land together are asserting that they belong together. And an assertion can be wrong. That word claim is doing very deliberate work. And I want to defend it before we go any further. On day 3, I told you that the gap between 2 cards is a measurement. A measurement is a passive thing. It sits there. It doesn't argue with you. A cluster is not like that. A cluster is active. When 3 cards land in a tight knot in the upper left of your surface, the geometry is not merely reporting a fact about position. It is putting something forward. It is saying, these 3 belong together. Read us as one thing. That is a claim. And claims have a property that measurement do not have. They can be false. Today, you learn to hear the claim, take it seriously, and test it in that order and without skipping the middle step. Let me sharpen the difference, because if you treat cluster the way you treat a distance, you will read it wrong. Distance from day 3 is a measurement. The gap has a size. It states a fact about position. It makes no argument. And your job is to record it. 4 inches is 4 inches. There is nothing to disagree or agree with. Cluster is a different kind of object. A cluster asserts. It says these members belong together and you should read us as one unit. So your job is different too. With distance, you record. With cluster, you record and then you test. Now, hold on to the first half of that, because there is a way to get this exactly wrong, and clever people get it wrong in a specific direction. The temptation, once I tell you a cluster makes a claim, is to become suspicious of it, to hold it at arm's length, to decide in advance that the cluster is probably an artifact of your shuffling, or your table, or the way your hand happened to drop the cards. That is not skepticism. That is just a different flavor of interference. You overriding the field with your own preference, which is exactly what the cognitive override signal exists to catch. The cluster gets the same respect as everything else on your table. You record what it claims faithfully, in full, before you evaluate it. The test comes after the record, never before and never instead. Here is the discipline that follows from that cluster being a claim, and it is straight from the reading sequence in the book. Read the cluster as a single unit before any card individually. You turn the clustered cards together, not one, then the next, together. And you ask yourself, what does this group say as a whole? Only after you have an answer to that question do you look at the individual members. Why does the order matter so much? Because of what the cluster claimed. It claimed to be one thing. If you immediately break it apart into its members and read them one at a time, you have refused the claim before you ever tested it. You have quietly decided that these are 3 separate cards that happen to be near each other, and that is a conclusion arrived at without evidence in the first 2 seconds. Give the claim a chance. Let the group be a group. Ask what the three of them together are saying that none of them says alone. And this is genuinely difficult. So let me name the difficulty. Your eye doesn't want to do this. Your eye wants to land on the most interesting card in the group and start there. The most dramatic image. The one you have feelings about. That is the eye behaving exactly as it always has. And it is the habit this whole method exists to interrupt. The group first, then the members, in that order. There is also a practical reason. When you start with a single most striking card, that card colors everything you read afterward. The other two stop being independent information and become supporting cast for the story the first card started. Read the group first and you get one reading. Read the star card first and you get that card's reading twice more in echo. Now, a refinement. And it is the one that separates a real cluster reading from a lazy one. Density alone is not the claim. Where the density sits is part of the claim. Remember the zones from your constellation map? Nearest you is your body. Personal lived experience. The middle band is the edge. Boundary, exit, entry, limit. The far region is the field. Relational space. Outside your control. A tight knot of 3 cards is not one signal. It is at least 3 different signals depending on where it landed, near your body. The convergence is close in. Whatever is concentrating, it is personal and lived and already inside your experience. It is not happening at a distance and it is not happening to someone else. At the edge, the concentration is sitting on a boundary. A limit, an exit, a threshold. It is pressing on something. Out in the field, the weight is in relational space, outside your control. Something is converging that is not yours to move. Same density, same number of cards, 3 entirely different claims. So when you write your geometry sentence today, there is a cluster, is not sufficient. It is barely a sentence. Where is the cluster? How tight is it? How many cards are in it? Those are the components of the claim. And if you leave them out, you have not recorded the claim. You have recorded that a claim was made, which is very nearly useless in 14 days when you're trying to compare it against something else. Now, the extreme case, and it is the one that proves density is graded rather than binary. Sometimes the cards do not form a cluster. They form a collapse. All of them land in an extremely tight knot, nearly overlapping, no significant space between any of them. And here the claim changes character entirely. A collapse is not saying these cards belong together. It is saying everything is modifying everything simultaneously. Overload, conflation, a breakdown of distinctions, which means, and this is the part I want you to hold carefully because it is the only place in the method where I'm going to tell you to reverse a rule I just gave you. The reading task inverts. For an ordinary cluster, read the group as one unit first. For a collapse, reach each card individually with a space between readings. Allow a pause after each one. Let the distinction reestablish itself before you move to the next. Why the reversal? because the two rules are actually the same rule wearing different clothes. And the rule is give the geometry what it is missing. An ordinary cluster has already achieved a unity, and your habit is to break it apart prematurely, so the discipline is to hold it together and hear it as one. A collapse has lost all its distinctions. Everything has merged into everything. Reading it as a single unit would simply repeat the pathology back to itself. You would be adding your own conflation on top of the fields. So the discipline is to hold the cards apart deliberately and let separation return. The book puts it in one line. The reading task is to separate what has merged, not to supply more information. And one more instruction for a collapse, which you should hold for later in the arc. In a collapse, there is usually one card that has been caught up in the knot, but genuinely represents a distinct thread. Find it. Ask which card does not belong to this group. But that is a phase 2 skill, and you're not being asked to do it today.